Two guys in the dark.
I received a call to an unknown medical in a CVS parking lot at around 5 a.m. I arrived to find a middle-aged man stumbling and shaking his way around the parking lot. After talking to him for a few minutes, it turns out that he had gotten kicked out of his halfway house for abusing his roommates while they were sleeping. He had called 911 because his head felt empty and his feet felt spongy. Can't make this stuff up. So I load the guy into my truck and start down the road to the nearest hospital. As I am face deep in my paperwork, I hear a commotion coming from the bench that he is sitting on. I look up, and the dude is furiously pleasuring himself. I yelled at him to cut that nonsense out, and he says that I can't help it. Jesus is telling me that I need to do it. Having watched Bringing Out the Dead recently, I had an idea. I wrapped one of the foil blankets around his head turban style, and placed my stethoscope on his forehead and said, "Well, I don't hear Jesus anymore." The man then proceeds to become much happier and exclaims that I have helped him so much. I walked him into the ER with the foil turban wrapped around his head. After I deposited him into a room, I warned the charge nurse not to take the foil turban off, or Jesus will tell him to do naughty things. As I turn around, I see the tech walking out of the room with the foil turban in hand, and then throw it away. I sighed and peeked my head into where the man was now nude, and sprawled out on the bed, pleasuring himself like it was his last day on earth. I just hung my head and left. It's their problem now. I was working a nice Sunday night last summer, and we hadn't been to a car or a motorcycle wreck all day, and we were just waiting for it. It's almost a safe bet on nice Sundays to have at least one wreck in our rural response area. We were sitting at the dinner table shooting the bull about local substance seekers when tones dropped from a car wreck. We were heading that way when police hit us on the radio to tell us that it was a car versus deer. I've never hit a deer, but I've seen plenty of wrecks, so I'm thinking that it could be a straightforward run. Police chimed back in that they were pretty sure that the guy was DOA, dead on arrival. We rolled up on scene, and lo and behold, this dude was pretty messed up. There was blood everywhere. Picture this. The deer, a large antler buck, went through the windshield, antlers first, driver's side window, thrashing around and flaying this guy alive for a few seconds. Deer had cut itself badly going in and bled out, but not before ripping this guy's chest open and making him unrecognizable by all standards. Probably the most blood in a wreck that I have ever seen. So I drive a long way out into a nice neighborhood in the South Bay, to a decent working class home. The home is clean, conservative. As I enter the bedroom, I notice that the door has been forced. Evidently, the patient's wife has been trying to wake him, but the patient locked the door. The fire department is working on a 59-year-old man wearing nothing but a bathrobe, lying unconscious in bed. There's a strong odor of ethanol about him. There's an adult video, VHS, playing on a small TV on a table at the foot of the bed. As we install the airway passage and administer the oxygen, I notice things laying next to the patient on the bed. An empty bottle, an adult toy. Is that an adult magazine? Another adult toy. I open patient's robe for an examination. His chest is a little bloody, and he appears to be wearing a rubber or a catheter. My EMT partner brings in the gurney. As we get ready to move the patient over from the bed to the gurney, I noticed a latex tube with a bulb pump, like on a blood pressure cuff, on the end with the patient. A firefighter remarks, "I don't like how this is going to end," as we roll the patient on to his left side. The tube was coming out of the bulb pump is clearly going up the patient's bottom. "Well, I'm not taking this with me," I say. I use my trauma shears to cut the tube to let out the airway, but instead of air, a trickle of nasty brown fluid comes out. Pulling the now deflated bladder attached to the tube slowly out of the patient's behind brings a big log. Double ill. Now that the thing is out of his rear, we roll him back over. I notice that he got tucked, silent of the lamb style. His junk is now purple. And I realize that the catheter, or rubber, is really a latex adult toy. I gingerly cut off the ring. Triple ew. At the hospital, the patient sobered up and then went home. A call comes in for a suicide attempt at 4:29 a.m., 1 minute before my shift was scheduled to end. I arrive on the scene at a skilled nursing facility before the fire department, with police already on the scene. I walk down the hall to where the patient's room is. Police say that you're not going to believe this. Walking into the room, I see a large black man standing beside the patient's bed, holding direct pressure on the L coastal arch, with the patient on oxygen. 15 LPM, non-rebreather mask. The patient is this scrawny little white guy in his 50s, who's at the facility because of a stroke that left him with his left side deficits and severe cognitive deficits. Holding a pair of sewing scissors, a cop says that he had stabbed himself with the scissors, pulled out 2 feet of his intestines, right over there. I stopped and picked my jaw off the floor. The cop is pointing to a table with, sure enough, a little pile of intestines on that, which looks about 2 feet long. My partner says, "Is there anything else?" I mumble something about a trauma dressing and get one out of the airway bag. I hear the partner scurry off. The orderly, the large black man, tells me that the patient wanted to kill himself by cutting out his heart. Evidently, the intestines got in the way. My partner returns with the responding fire unit. They're shuffling in like it's a total nonsense call. I hit him with 55-year-old male, made a 2-inch incision on his left abdomen, pulled out the 2 feet of bowel. As I'm pointing to the pile of guts, the looks on their face must have been exactly like mine. We get to work moving this guy, transporting him to a trauma center. Though the guy's skin signs are bad, his vitals are rock solid. Strangely, the guy seems to be in no discomfort. We get a big IV in place and run a little bit of fluid. We get to the hospital, and I give my report. The docs are unimpressed by my incision, but are hopefully more impressed by the hematoma under the wound, which has grown to 8 inches. They also seem skeptical that the patient pulled out that much bowel until I pointed out that they can look inside the basin of the patient's intestines that we have considerately brought. Everyone has the same reaction. While the student doctors are debating pain management, the attendant tells them to get their heads out of their behinds and get this guy into surgery right now. It's July 2014, and I am a handful of months into my first paid service, out in Connecticut. Most folks who don't know much about Connecticut assume that it is this rich, affluent place, and most of the shore and southwest is. We have some of the wealthiest towns in the country. However, Hartford is a dump. It sucks, and if you want to get trauma experience in, you go to Hartford or New Haven. The crime rates are huge, and you will get all sorts of horrendous nonsense. Point in fact, you could write off a Kevlar vest up to $700 on your taxes based on your service location, so that you could own one. Unfortunately, New England is hot and humid, and EMS is a mobile business, and having ceramic plates wearing you down is exhausting, and it's definitely not worth it. It is sweltering, and I'm responding to my second bullet wound of the week, my third of all time. We arrive on the scene to a bunch of people, but before police have arrived, the folks around there are asking us to help this person, and it leads us to believe whatever has happened is over, and this man definitely needs our help. My medic gets on the horn, makes the executive decision to go in before the police even show up. I grab the green bag, which carries anything you will ever need. I sprint to the 50 feet of this dude. I'm excited and nervous. I want to prove myself. I have the worst tunnel vision at this moment. I am doing an assessment, and he is unresponsive. His vitals are low, and they're dropping fast. He's unconscious. This is a young, African-American male, and he is clearly wearing gang colors. None of this has occurred to me, only the 2 holes in his body that are leaking. I assess that these wounds are not puncturing the lungs. My medic gets him on oxygen as I'm applying the pressure and dressings. We're about to package him up for transport when I hear what sounds like firecrackers. The next thing I know, I'm facing down on the cement with my medic on top of me. I'm screaming at him, asking him what his problem is. He is dragging me behind the ambulance and away from the patient. I'm furious at that moment, and then it dawns on me at what is happening. We're being shot at. Someone is shooting in my direction, and it is horrifying. It was both the fastest and the slowest moment of my entire life. We got back in our rig, hit reverse, and back down the road as fast as we can. While I got on the radio and then explained what has happened. Police were there in just a few moments. We grabbed the man and we took him to the hospital. He crashed en route, but was still alive when we got him there. I have no idea what has happened to him after that. All I can say is, I really hope that this guy has gotten better. I remember doing ride-alongs with an EMS crew for exposure hours in my nursing school. I was sitting in the truck, on a call. They wheeled in an elderly woman. She complained of weakness and shortness of breath. Fairly common, and usually not emergency symptoms for elder people. So they just wheeled her in at a leisurely pace to bring her to the hospital. Her vitals were acceptable. She didn't have any labored breathing, so we pull out her neighborhood and are about 15 minutes from the hospital when she goes unresponsive and then stops breathing. Lights and sirens, bagging, which include a face mask with a bag on the end to make them breathe. Her and EKG looked fine. That's odd. So the medic goes to intubate, put a tube down her throat so that we can have a secure way to breathe for her. And no sooner does he take the oxygen mask off of her face and lean over her, that she retches full force. An eruption of bright red blood, right square into the medic's face. He was covered in vomity blood from head to toe. The entire truck looked like a Nightmare on Elm Street film. But the fun wasn't over just yet. No sooner did she empty her entire blood supply into the guy's glasses, that she goes into PEA. The heart is sending no electrical impulses, but the muscle is saying no. So we're pushing on her chest. Still haven't done the airway test. And each push is gushing a little bit more blood into the mask bag. She also lost bowel and bladder control. The garnish on this ridiculous mess. We continued the resuscitation for 10 minutes on the way to the hospital. Equipment was getting contaminated as we touch it, each other, and still gushed with the CPR compressions. There wasn't an inch of us, the patient, the truck, the stretcher, or anything that didn't have coated in blood. Shoes, socks, even soaked through my scrub pants to my underwear and my skin. I was less than a year into nursing school. I was 19 years old, and I had an old lady with vomit blood on my crotch. I willingly signed up for this profession, and even decided to go into debt for the educational opportunity. She never made it to the hospital, but the horror on the faces of the ER team as they looked inside the truck told me that this doesn't normally happen. I stayed in nursing school. I've been a nurse for about 15 years now. I used to work as an AEMT equivalent in Germany. One time an old woman called us because her foot was bleeding. Nothing unusual so far. We drove without any expectations of what was waiting for us. When we arrived, we rang the bell, and the daughter of the old woman had opened up the door. The first thing that I noticed was the incredibly awful smell of decay, or something rotting. The daughter showed us the way to her mom, and the more that we came near her, the worse the smell had become. From the inside, the house looked messy, as a contrary to the first sight of the house from outside. We approached this old woman, and she was wearing dirty, yellow-brownish stained clothing, and had greasy hair. But we still wondered where this awful smell was coming from. I, until this point, had caught multiple times already, because the smell was getting more and more intense. We asked the woman what was happening, and she told us that she hurt her foot, and now it is bleeding. What she described as blood was a dirty 1-month-old. We asked her how long she was wearing it. Sock, soaked in a brown-red mix of blood, pus, an old ichor. My patient tried to remove the sock to see exactly how bad the infection had become. As they pulled the sock off to her ankle, a handful of maggots had fell out of the sock onto the ground. A flash of the worst smell of my life nearly got me to puke. My partner resigned quickly, removing the sock even further, and put 2 bandages around the sock. And we drove her straight to the emergency room. Waiting there was a pain too, because the smell was incredibly horrible. After we handed this lady over, we asked ourselves how she didn't have septic problems already, or at least a fever. To this day, I'll remember the quote of the woman as we asked her why she didn't change the sock, or go to the doctor much earlier. And she said, in German, "Last Friday it itched a bit, but I'm not feeling anything anymore."
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.